It was a horrible shock, and we called the police immediately.
And then I just screamed for John, screamed.
I was the call taker that night shift when the call came in.
Police, what's going on? 5515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left in our daughter's phone. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
Oh my God! Please.
She's hysterical. She says there's a kidnapping.
Please.
Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been gone?
No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
It was Patsy Ramsey who made the frantic call, reporting that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was gone. A ransom note had been left behind, demanding money, urging silence, and threatening severe consequences. But then the focus of the investigation shifted dramatically. JonBenét wasn't missing. She was discovered under troubling circumstances in the family's basement. In that moment, the case was no longer about an abduction. It became a serious criminal investigation, and suspicion turned inward toward the very people who had called for help. The perfect family portrait suddenly seemed to fracture. Investigators found no signs of forced entry and no unknown footprints in the snow. If an outsider wasn't involved, who remained? What happened in the silent hours of that night? What set of circumstances led to a young girl's life being tragically cut short? This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey. Before we analyze the suspicions in the case, please tell me where you saw this video from. I will read it all and spread it to the world. From the outside, the Ramseys appeared to be living the American dream. Their home, a grand, stone-faced mansion in Boulder, Colorado, spanned nearly 7,000 square feet. It was the kind of house that prompted whispers of admiration. In their community, the Ramseys were more than well known. They were seen as a wealthy, charitable, and church-going family of high standards and even higher appearances. John was a business mogul, Patsy a former beauty queen, JonBenét a child star, and Burke a quiet son. They projected an image of perfection, but not everything that is polished is flawless. JonBenét Ramsey was a picture of quiet success. A former Navy man and a graduate of the University of Michigan, by 1996 he was the CEO of Access Graphics, a booming computer distribution company with over $1 billion in revenue. His Christmas bonus that year was $118,000, a significant sum at the time. John was described as private, calculated, and calm. He had 3 children from a previous marriage, though his daughter Beth had tragically passed away in a car crash in 1992. By 1996, he had built a new life with Patsy and their 2 young children, Burke and JonBenét. John avoided the spotlight, but everything about him, from his career to his home, spoke of control, achievement, and prestige. If John was the architect of the family's success, Patsy was its public face. A former Miss West Virginia, she brought energy, elegance, and a flair for showmanship to the Ramsey household. She was deeply involved in the social life of Boulder's elite, a Southern belle with a polished voice and a passion for pageants. However, beneath the charm, many described her as meticulous, image-conscious, and highly focused. She was the one who entered JonBenét into child beauty pageants, selecting her outfits, choreographing her routines, and styling her meticulously. Some observers felt she was channeling her own ambitions through her daughter, turning her into a symbol of perfection. What stood out most in the aftermath of the tragedy was a chilling question debated by experts. Was the person who called 911 also the person who wrote the ransom note? The youngest in the Ramsey family was JonBenét Ramsey. At 6 years old, she was radiant and poised, with a smile that captivated those around her. Her name, a combination of JonBenét and Patricia, seemed to brand her for a special destiny from birth. By age 4, She was already competing in national beauty pageants, winning crowns and accolades. Audiences, judges, and her mother adored her. However, some critics raised concerns that she was presented in a way that was too mature for her age. Burke Ramsey was JonBenét's older brother, 9 years old at the time. Described as smart, shy, and interested in video games, he was the quieter child who often seemed to be in the background. In family photos, he was present but rarely the center of attention, and in the initial media coverage, he was barely mentioned. Just weeks before the incident, a business magazine profiled the Ramseys, praising their wealth, charm, and achievements. They were a family people seemed to envy, not question. But behind closed doors were their unseen pressures. It was Christmas night, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado. The Ramsey family had spent the evening at a holiday party hosted by close friends. By all accounts, it was a quiet, uneventful evening. The Ramseys returned home between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock p.m. According to Patsy, JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car, and they carried her inside to her bed. Burke was also said to have gone straight to his room. The house was quiet, with no signs of anything out of place. On the morning of December 26th, between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., Patsy Ramsey said she woke up early to prepare for a planned family trip. As she descended the back staircase, she reported finding a handwritten ransom letter on the steps. At nearly 3 pages long, the message was bizarre. It claimed to be from a small foreign faction and demanded $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus. It warned the family not to call the police and threatened severe consequences, ending with the cryptic sign-off, Victory, SBTC. The meaning of the acronym has never been determined. Minutes later, Patsy Ramsey called 911. The recording captures a frantic and often unintelligible voice, conveying extreme distress as she reported a kidnapping and the discovery of the note. By 6 a.m., Boulder police officers were at the residence, expecting to investigate an abduction. What they found, however, was a scene of confusion. The house was full of people, not just the family, but also friends, neighbors, and a minister, all of whom had been called shortly after Patsy's discovery. They moved freely through the rooms, unknowingly compromising what would become a critical scene for forensic review. Police noted no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or pried doors. They were told to wait for further instructions, as it was believed the kidnappers might call. As the hours passed, however, that scenario seemed less and less likely. The ransom note had specifically warned against contacting police, yet they were there. It also implied a call would come, but no such call ever arrived. The home became a mix of grief and speculation. A detective, seeing the lack of progress, suggested John Ramsey conduct one more search of the house. John agreed and walked with a family friend, Fleet White, toward the basement. What happened next would change everything. Until that basement door opened, there was still a possibility of rescue. But what was found inside shattered that hope. At around 1 o'clock p.m., John Ramsey and Fleet White entered the basement. Behind a previously unchecked door, John discovered his daughter. She was lying on her back on the floor. Her mouth had materials reportedly found at the scene. Her wrists showed signs of binding with a nylon cord, and an improvised mechanism fashioned from a broken paintbrush and cord was also noted. Strikingly, a piece of fabric reportedly from Patsy Ramsey's clothing was found on the mechanism. The handle was confirmed to be from one of Patsy's paintbrushes, but one half of the handle was never recovered, raising questions. An unidentified substance was noted by medical examiners, which some theorized was an attempt to alter forensic evidence. The discovery was made beside a suitcase placed under the basement window, which may have been intended to stage a point of entry. No family member claimed to have placed it there. Instead of waiting for crime scene investigators, John carried his daughter's body upstairs, laid her near the Christmas tree, removed the materials and bindings, and covered her with a blanket. From an investigative standpoint, this action irreversibly compromised the integrity of the scene. Initial forensic findings estimated the critical incident occurred between late night on December 25th and early morning on December 26th. The report cited signs consistent with restriction from the improvised mechanism and a major injury to the head. Bruises on her back, legs, and shoulders were interpreted by some as signs of a physical struggle. Experts debated whether the findings suggested inappropriate contact, and forensic anomalies in the clothing contained DNA that did not match anyone in the family. One small detail stood out. A bowl of pineapple with milk was found on the kitchen table, and JonBenét had undigested pineapple in her stomach. Burke's fingerprints were on the bowl, but he claimed no memory of eating it, and Patsy denied serving it. The scene was mishandled from the beginning, creating further obstacles for the investigation. Friends and neighbors had contaminated the house. Burke was sent away before a formal interview, and an officer failed to document everyone entering or leaving. The family's actions also raised suspicions, as they contacted lawyers and PR experts within hours of the discovery. Several red flags were noted in the case file. Medical findings that remained subject to debate were documented, with some experts suggesting they indicated more than one incident. The fact that there was no evidence of a struggle or screams led to theories that JonBenét may have been incapacitated, but toxicology testing was limited. A residue on one of her socks didn't match the basement environment, suggesting she may have been moved. The basement window setup made little physical sense as an entry point. All of this painted a picture not just of tragedy, but of a chaotic investigation where leads were not followed and procedural errors may have obscured the truth. From the earliest moments, Boulder police focused on two competing theories: that the responsible party came from inside the house or from the outside. The most immediate suspicion fell on the family. Investigators found it difficult to believe a stranger could have committed such a calculated act and left no trace. The theory that the kidnapping was staged emerged quickly. The ransom note, written on Patsy's notepad with a pen from the house, was an anomaly. Its demand for $118,000 suggested insider knowledge. The family's behavior also drew scrutiny. They delayed police interviews for weeks and engaged legal and public relations consultants almost immediately. Behavioral experts noted that in the frantic 911 call, neither parent asked the operator, "Where is JonBenét?" a detail they found inconsistent with genuine parental panic. While police leaned toward the theory of an inside job, the idea of an external intruder was not entirely dismissed. Supporting this were pieces of DNA found that did not match anyone in the family. Still, the intruder theory had significant weaknesses. The elaborate ransom note made little sense if the tragic outcome had already occurred, and no further communication was made to claim the ransom. The note's unprecedented length, theatrical language referencing lines from films, and the cryptic sign-off, "Victory, SBTC," all pointed away from a typical abduction. Forensic handwriting experts overwhelmingly agreed the note was not written by a stranger. With evidence pointing inward, who could the responsible party be? A persistent, though less popular, theory suggested JonBenét's father, John Ramsey, was involved. This theory begins with the fact that John was the one who discovered his daughter's body. He went with Fleet White to the basement, specifically to a small utility room police had overlooked. To some investigators, his actions seemed too direct, as if he already knew where to look. What followed raised more questions. His immediate removal of his daughter's body destroyed crucial evidence. Furthermore, the ransom note's specific demand matching his bonus suggested the writer had an intimate understanding of the family's finances. Yet, without definitive evidence, the case lingered, suspended between suspicion and silence. This behavior is highly unlikely for a random intruder. There were other troubling actions in the hours immediately following the discovery. John Ramsey appeared strangely calm to some observers. Instead of reacting with visible grief, he quickly made calls to attorneys, family friends, and even hired public relations specialists. While some attributed this to shock, others saw it as calculated damage control. There is also the fact that John was reluctant to participate in police interviews for weeks after the incident. He did not submit to a polygraph test until much later, and only under the supervision of a team considered friendly to the family. This reticence fueled suspicion that he had something to hide. Some theorists have gone even further, suggesting that John might not have been directly involved in the initial act, but instead orchestrated the cover-up. They believe he may have directed Patsy to write the ransom note and taken the lead in staging the scene to make it appear as an abduction gone wrong. In this version of events, John becomes the central figure coordinating the narrative, managing the media, and shielding the family from scrutiny. Questions were also raised about his actions after the critical incident. He never expressed strong public grief, and when Patsy passed away in 2006, John remained mostly silent, rarely speaking about JonBenét's case again. In interviews, he emphasized how the family had been victimized by the justice system and the press, but showed little emotional reflection on the loss of his daughter. Some aspects of his personal life added to the unease. John had lost another daughter, Beth, in a car accident years earlier. And while there is no known history of violence, some former colleagues mentioned professional tension and pressure inside Access Graphics, the billion-dollar company John led. The timing of the incident, coinciding with the company's peak publicity, led some to speculate that preserving his image and career may have become a driving force in how the aftermath was handled. Still, the theory that John Ramsey was the responsible party remains the least supported by physical evidence. No matching DNA was found, and there is no definitive proof. But his behavior, his control over the narrative, and the questionable choices made in those first critical hours continue to fuel doubt. Patsy Ramsey was also considered a primary person of interest in this case. To understand the theory that she may have been responsible, one must examine the layered profile of a woman shaped by pressure, control, and image. A former beauty queen, crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977, Patsy was raised in a culture that valued perfection and public recognition. That mindset followed her into motherhood. JonBenét was not just her daughter, but a reflection of her younger self. From the age of 4, the little girl was entered into child beauty pageants, dressed elaborately, and coached to perform with an advanced level of maturity. Friends described Patsy as deeply controlling and easily agitated when things didn't go according to plan. This need for control was likely tested by the time of the incident. Patsy was in recovery from ovarian cancer, a battle that would have shaken her physical and emotional stability. The home environment was reportedly tense, and according to some investigators, any small misbehavior, like a nighttime accident, could have triggered a disproportionate response. One theory suggests that on Christmas night, something JonBenét did, perhaps wetting the bed, pushed Patsy to a breaking point. In a moment of intense frustration, she may have reacted in a way that caused the major injury noted in the autopsy report. Realizing the gravity of the situation, she could have panicked and called John for help. From that point, the theory argues, a cover-up began. The improvised mechanism used in the restriction was crafted from a broken paintbrush belonging to Patsy. Curiously, one half of the paintbrush was never found, implying an attempt to hide evidence. A piece of Patsy's clothing was also reportedly found on the mechanism. According to this theory, Patsy wrote the lengthy ransom note using her own notepad and pen, and a discarded draft was even discovered in the home's trash. The note's emotional language and theatrical references led FBI profilers to believe it had a distinctly feminine voice, not typical of criminal demands. Her behavior also raised suspicion. Patsy was the one who found the 3-page ransom letter, curiously placed on the stairs. In the 911 call, some analysts felt she sounded overly dramatic. It was noted that neither she nor John asked, "Where is JonBenét?" After she thought the call had ended, the open line recorded a whispered conversation, with some interpreting the words to be, "What did you do? Help me, Jesus." Medical examiners documented findings that remain subject to debate. A strange white substance was noted that looked like lotion or a cleaning agent, implying someone may have tried to alter the scene post-mortem. Further disturbing details included JonBenét wearing oversized underwear that had been purchased for her cousin. Investigators suspected the swap was an attempt to mask forensic anomalies on her actual clothing. The meticulous nature of these changes seemed consistent with Patsy's known focus on appearances. Her resistance to taking a polygraph test early in the investigation only fueled public suspicion. She maintained her innocence until her passing in 2006, but to many, the pattern of control and the inconsistencies in behavior point to the possibility that the tragedy began as a moment of rage and ended in a desperate cover-up. Among the various theories, one of the most controversial is the hypothesis that her older brother, Burke Ramsey, was involved. This theory proposes that Burke, then 9 years old, may have unintentionally caused the critical incident during a moment of anger, possibly triggered by a minor sibling dispute. Faced with a devastating outcome, their parents, in a desperate attempt to protect their only remaining child, allegedly staged the scene. One of the most cited pieces of evidence is the bowl of pineapple found on the kitchen table. JonBenét's autopsy revealed undigested pineapple in her stomach. Burke's fingerprints were found on the bowl, but both parents denied serving the snack, and Burke claimed no memory of it. This led to suspicions that a late-night dispute over the snack may have escalated. JonBenét's head injury was another focal point. The major injury was believed to be caused by a blow from a blunt object, and some forensic experts argued that it was consistent with the shape and size of a large flashlight found in the kitchen. The flashlight had been wiped clean. Another key detail was the audio from Patsy's 911 call. Though she believed she had hung up, the line remained open, capturing faint background voices. Some analyses suggested the presence of Burke's voice, contradicting claims that he had slept through the entire event. Burke's behavior during interviews also fueled suspicions. In videotaped sessions with child psychologists, he appeared oddly detached, playing with toys and smiling at unusual times. At one point, he reportedly asked, "What's going to happen to me?" a question some interpreted as revealing an underlying awareness of the situation. Unconfirmed reports mentioned past incidents of behavioral issues. Burke was shielded from law enforcement in the immediate aftermath. Instead of being interviewed right away, he was sent to a friend's house. Supporters of this theory argue that the complexity of the staging, the bindings, the improvised mechanism, and the lengthy ransom note suggested adult intervention to cover up a tragic accident. Despite these suspicions, there is no physical evidence directly linking Burke to the act. He has consistently denied any involvement and, in 2016, filed a major defamation lawsuit against a media company that suggested he was responsible. The matter was later settled. Though controversial, the theory remains a significant part of the case's history. Over nearly 3 decades, the investigation into JonBenét's case was unprecedented in its scale. Hundreds of individuals were looked into, with 200 formally interviewed and dozens asked to provide samples or take polygraph tests. Yet, despite the man-hours and federal resources, it became one of the most exhaustive yet fruitless manhunts in American history. In the early stages, suspicion briefly turned toward William Bill McReynolds, a retired professor known for playing Santa Claus at local events, including a Ramsey Christmas party just 2 days before the incident. The public became uneasy when it was revealed that his wife had written a play years earlier about a young girl whose life was tragically cut short in a basement. Despite the eerie similarity, McReynolds fully cooperated with investigators, and his DNA did not match any unknown samples. He was officially cleared, but was haunted by the public association until his passing in 2002. Gary Howard Oliva, an individual with a prior criminal record, also stands out. At the time of the incident, Oliva was living in the Boulder area, within walking distance of the Ramsey home. In 2000, he was arrested for possessing troubling materials, and inside his backpack, authorities found a magazine with JonBenét's photo. According to a former friend, Oliva once called him in tears, admitting he had hurt a little girl by accident. Years later, Oliva allegedly wrote a letter from prison confessing, but the details did not match undisclosed case evidence. Crucially, his DNA did not match the unidentified sample from the scene, and he has never been charged. No suspect sparked more sensational headlines, yet collapsed more quickly than John Mark Carr. In 2006, the former elementary school teacher, then living in Thailand, sent an email claiming responsibility. After being extradited to the United States, he gave a confession stating, "She died in my arms. It was an accident." The media frenzy was immediate, but his narrative quickly unraveled. He was unfamiliar with key details of the scene, and most importantly, his DNA did not match. He was released without charge, and experts labeled him as a delusional individual who falsely inserted himself into the narrative. Finally, many independent investigators have focused on Michael Helgoth, a local machine shop worker with an unstable personality and a criminal history. Just before Christmas 1996, Helgoth reportedly told a friend, "Something big is going to happen," and mentioned coming into a large sum of money. Less than 2 months after the incident, Helgoth was found deceased. His death was ruled a suicide, but some circumstances were noted as unusual. A pair of military boots and a stun gun were found in his home, with some experts theorizing that marks on JonBenét's body could be consistent with such a device. Though this remains controversial, some believe Helgoth did not act alone and may have been silenced. After decades of investigation and endless speculation, the case leaves us with more questions than answers. It forces us to confront the nature of truth when evidence is compromised and narratives are controlled. What is the duty of a family in the face of an unthinkable tragedy? And where does that duty end and the path to justice begin? If the truth was hidden by a deliberate act, a tragic accident, or the failings of an investigation, what does that teach us about the systems we trust to protect the most vulnerable? The case of JonBenét Ramsey is more than an unsolved mystery. It is a profound and unsettling reflection on memory, family, and the elusive nature of justice itself. Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.